Right, more on Australia's shock support at the UN over the weekend. I'm joined now by the President of the Australian Jewish Association, David Adler. Well, we ventilated a bit of this horror vote over the weekend then with Dennis Shanahan, and he makes the point that there's a real gutlessness of the federal government. The Prime Minister, of course, went out and said there was no change in position about a month ago when Penny Wong gave a speech, said we were headed down this end, and there was no change until there was change on Friday night. That's the problem. How does the Jewish community react after this vote?
Peter, as you would expect, the Jewish community is shocked, devastated, angry, but most of all, there is a feeling of real betrayal from our government. Not only has it turned on Israel, our only democratic ally in the Middle East, it has turned on the Jewish people. This will undoubtedly fuel the hostility that we see on places like the university campuses. It will embolden more anti-Semitism. It has also betrayed our important allies. In AUKUS, with the United States and the United Kingdom, Australia is now isolated as the only country which has voted in favour of this resolution. Finally, it has betrayed the Australian people. It is contrary to our values to align this country with Hamas. It is handing a reward to the terrorists. It's like Australia is serving the terrorists. We don't mind that you were murderers, rapers, took hostages, the most barbaric acts, killed the most Jews in one day since the Holocaust. That doesn't matter. We will support you because that's what it signals.
We're missing some countries there on that graphic I put up about those who voted against this motion. We're missing, of course, the United States and others. There were 9 in all. But we broke with our major allies. We broke with the United States and we broke with Britain and Canada. That's what I can't understand. And I also can't understand, picking up Dennis's point, why the government didn't go out and argue, at least try and attempt to argue, why this was necessary for Australia to junk 70 years of bipartisanship on this policy. I felt gutted over the weekend, David, when I saw this play out. I was watching most of the coverage on Saturday morning. Your community, beyond all the officials that you deal with, how does the ordinary Jewish Australian feel? It's been a very rugged 8 or so months now, but after this vote by their own government, how do they feel?
Well, more and more we see hostility, frankly, to Israel. We see a failure to deal with some of the social problems, and notably the rise in anti-Semitism is a terrible problem. We see the weakness in dealing with the issues on the university campus, and I know you've commented on this before, and you alluded to the fact that in some electorates, in some Labor electorates, there's a significant Muslim vote. Well, pretty well top of the chart is the Minister for Education, Jason Clare, and his seat of Blaxland, which has over 30% Muslims. And you've got to ask the question, is that part of the reason why he fails to act and discharge his responsibility to make sure that all groups of students feel safe on our university campuses? We think it's a real tragedy. There is a sense of betrayal, and I don't know how to put it stronger than that. This is not the Australia that we recognised a few years ago.
You make mention of those violent university protests. We've obviously seen the police come into campuses overseas, but not in Australia. Over the weekend, Jennifer Westacott, who people will know from her former job with the Business Council of Australia, she's now the Vice-Chancellor of Western Sydney University. She came out very strongly, condemned these protests and anti-Semitism. But the head of Melbourne Uni, the Chancellor there, Jane Hansen, she refused to call out any specific anti-Semitism crisis within higher education. You've mentioned there Jason Clare, you're kinder than me. I think he's absolutely motivated by the constituency in his seat. I think he's absolutely motivated by that. And we know too, on a number of university campuses, staff were told, don't confront protesters if they barge their way into your classroom. Let them have their say. Now, why on earth should any student who wants an education, particularly a Jewish student, be forced to put up with this in the lecture theatre or in the tutorial room? One thing to protest outside, David, but why should it be brought into the classroom?
Well, you're right, and you've got to ask the question, are our universities to be centres of education, or are they to be primarily centres of radical activism and indeed anti-Australian activism? And it's fine for people to have a different perspective on political issues, but there are certain lines which these groups have clearly crossed. When you are chanting for an intifada, you are expressing support for a violent uprising against Jews. That's what an intifada is. It involved murder, knife attacks, bombs, suicide bombings of civilians, of buses. It's a mass murder program. That's what an intifada is. And if the university administration allows teaching to be disrupted with calls of intifada, they are giving the wave through for incitement of violence against the Jews, against the Jewish students. That's what intifada is. There is no excuse for it in this country. It is not an expression of a political opinion. It is an expression of support for a program of violence.
As horrific as it is, you're absolutely right, David Adler. Thank you